Okay, please pardon the interruption. Boy, that sounded more serious than I intended it to sound. Just again, as I wanted to just give a quick layout of where we are going. I mentioned just a few moments ago we're going to have a meal here and some welcoming remarks by Consul General George on behalf of the Government of Canada. We'll break bread here for a while, and then shortly thereafter we'll start today's panel, and then really wrap up. That'll end the information flow of these proceedings. Tomorrow is a completely different format for those of you that are staying. Tomorrow morning is a Doing Business in Canada seminar. These are akin to what we run throughout the United States and Canada going the reverse way. And they are sponsored in part by the Ohio Development Services Agency, our export assistance program here in the state, and the Canadian Consulate, and frankly the lead on it's the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit. And that's in part because we have 3 Canadian cities in town that are finalists for the Smart City Awards that are happening as we speak, and those include the cities of Surrey, BC, Montreal, and Winnipeg. So those cities are going to come over as part of those proceedings and talk a little bit about why U.S. companies should be doing business in those markets and selling their goods and potentially putting bricks and mortar and employees there as they expand. It's for many of you an opportunity to see the types of programs that we use on a daily basis almost, to help small and medium-sized enterprises. And frankly, we've been on a roadshow with PNC Bank. I think we're on like city number 14 or 15 right now in doing these. I mean, we've been doing them all over the place. But what that also means is I believe there's about 15 Ohio companies coming here that have not been part of these proceedings, and also all of you. But basically, it's Export 101 with a bit of Canada-U.S. as well of our cities here. We'll wrap that up around the lunch hour. I'd encourage as many of you as possible to come. It's worth seeing, not my part of it, but you can really get to hear the issues because by tomorrow I'm going to be done. But it's an opportunity to see, we talk a lot about small and medium-sized enterprises, but to see in action fear factor about the border, immigration issues, and kind of blocking and tackling 101, the issues that those companies face. Also, for many of you, it's free tax, legal advice, as well as incentive programs and other types of things. So that's how that'll go. And then about noon, we'll all convene. The polling results that we've been gathering, some of the conceptualizing of the ideas that we've heard, will start about 12 o'clock, and we'll meet as the groups of the Canada-U.S. associations to really start charting out what the future looks like from here. As I've said, key deliverables for us will be some type of coming together again to look at what we've been doing, likely from this time moving forward, but some type of you can do only so much over the phone and over email, et cetera. But coming together, putting heads together for those that want involved in the fall sometime, perhaps integrating that with some of the existing events. A second deliverable is going to be what exactly are we doing the day after Election Day? In terms of Canada-U.S. I'm confident the overwhelming majority of we may be in a recount scenario because of us here in Ohio, but the overwhelming majority of the associations here will undoubtedly want to do something on the impact of the U.S. elections on Canada, and perhaps coming up with a coordinated vision for that, perhaps a roadshow and communication strategy with that makes sense rather than competing. And frankly, we never compete. It's usually sins of omission versus commission. We just usually don't know what each other's doing, and we end up cannibalizing audiences or messaging and things like that. And then thirdly, what is our plan, our strategy plan, when the new administration is in place in the early part of January? And that, of course, makes sense for us to think about what are we going to be doing in Washington in the winter. That, of course, requires us to communicate a bit. Virtually as well. So one of the things that we did is the founding partners of this endeavor, as well as our sponsors, put together some seed funding, and in fact, Dickinson Wright put together the overwhelming majority of the funding to create a new website that'll over time become hopefully one of the areas of a central clearinghouse of information about the Canada-U.S. relationship, kind of a one-stop shop. If you guys can put it up on the framework of what it'll look like. It's built now, but there still has to be some infrastructure. So you can see there's some imagery today. It may be tough to see, but some key features of this will be, number one, there will be a common calendar feature. So basically anything that the associations that you've met here today as platform council members and folks like that are doing will all be in one place, and they can be updated as organizations want. Any of the Twitter feeds, any resources, so when folks are putting out reports like today, it's all in one place. The idea is good data in, but also good data out. So a number of the associations have agreed to load their contact lists into that. Now let me be very clear, nobody's giving up ownership of their contact list. They're all firewalled from each other. But what it is it puts your contacts into one place. And so, say for example, we're doing something at the Canada-U.S. Business Association in Detroit, Windsor, but we want the word to get out to the AmCham Canada network or to some of our other partners around. You will get a text or an email that says, do you want this notice to go out to your members, yes or no? And with the press of a button, it will go out. And hopefully that type of communication fosters greater coordination and the like. So those are some of the key features that we're looking at. All of the S.A.G.E website will be migrated over to this site so that we just want to be clear that nobody owns any of this. So right now, everything, as you know, is housed on an Ohio State server, and while that's been wonderful, and we can't thank them enough, as we want to ensure that all parties have the opportunity to be a part of this. If you're hosting this somewhere else, you may have some qualms with going to glenn.osu, right? So we want to make sure that there's an independent leak. We own all the domain names for US Canada S.A.G.E, US Canada News, all those types of things. So that'll be our way to communicate moving forward. And the idea is, let me be very clear. Let me offer my perspective. The last thing I believe we need to do is create another organization or structure. What we need is infrastructure to help coordinate the existing organizations that we have. And that's what we've tried to do in terms of putting up and putting the capital up front to make these types of strategic investments moving forward. And the goal is, that this continues this discussion from this day forward. I was thinking just over the weekend, and nobody wants to hear many more speeches today, but I was thinking about, it was probably a mistake. It was a mistake to call this a summit. I have a 5-year-old, and for those of you that haven't been around a 5-year-old or have them, he's big into letters. You just don't realize how many letters in the world there are until you have somebody next to you at all days. N, A, B, C, blah, blah, blah. And so what we do is he actually has a dictionary during the day, and he kind of goes and rolls over to it and reads and just picks out the letters and tries to create words. Clearly, he's going to get stuffed in lockers as a kid in high school. But people always say he's going to be a great athlete. His mother and I were both pretty good, glory days here. But I say I want him to be an engineer. I want him to be a nerd. But as we heard in the tech panels, those are the people. That's who I want him to be. But I was looking up. I said, what is a summit? And it has two definitions. It's the highest point of elevation, or on a mountain, or it's a gathering of government officials. And I said, that's probably not the right word for this event that we had. And then that night, most of you know I don't sleep a lot generally, and the movie Everest was on. And if you haven't seen it yet, man, that thing, it's an incredible movie. But I was watching Everest, and I didn't realize before you climb Mount Everest that you actually do almost 2 or 3 weeks of pre-climbs, to acclimate yourself. And in thinking about that, it was really somewhat metaphorical, but I thought it applied here today, is that, we can say, everybody says that they have a summit. Everybody, I think in some cases, we think that we've been to the top. But the proper word is probably we've been, over the past 10 years or so, kind of doing those acclimating climbs, that we still in many ways are at base camp for what we need to do in the Canada-U.S. relationship. And so, we can say we're at the summit now and looking to the sky and into the clouds and those types of things for a new vision. or I think maybe a greater level of acceptance, that's really the first step, as some of us know, is that that's actually, we're at base camp. And this is the start of a new process that hopefully will begin our ascent to a new vision for the Canada-U.S. relationship and the broader trade relationship. So I think, the work ahead of us will be hard. I think we need to acknowledge that this is not going to be an easy process. Slipped into Canadianese there, but that there's much to do going forward, but I think that we have the start here, and we'll conclude tomorrow with some of those ideas. Now, against that somewhat realistic, but perhaps not the most positive viewpoint, one of the things where we can't take a great deal of optimism from is what we've seen over the past several days, which is emblematic of the relationships, both professionally and personally, that so many of us have. It's been inspiring. I had the privilege, frankly, and being one of the organizers of this, to talk to all of the organizations before, multiple times before this event took place. And I was really shocked by how much is going on. Every organization, one, recognized the need for cooperation, also recognized the need that maybe we needed to do something different, but also it was more than talk. People said, we have these projects in the pipeline. We have these projects that we're doing. And I think Jim Phillips said it on one of our earliest calls. We need a collaboration of the doers, people that are doing things in Canada-U.S. And I think as we've seen over the last few days, we have that here today. Just as inspiring has been watching the substantive sessions, but also out in the hallways. Just the side meetings that have been taking place. And I think as we look at the types of activities we do moving forward, is how do you incorporate that into the overall program, allowing time for people in a place where they are. I mean, let's face it, there's not that many of us doing Canada-U.S. You can fit us in a room, obviously. But the idea is, how do we utilize those relationships and linkages to begin that ascent. So that is the positive step, and I want to just again thank the folks that we're meeting several times a week since last October on this. Every Monday at 11 o'clock, we had a conference call about this, and usually a couple other times a week, and that would be, of course, Chris Sands, a.k.a. Phil Donahue, but at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, Lori Tanous at the Cross Border Institute and Faro Group, and Beth Ann Schulke-Leach, who really has been performing yeoman service here at the John Glenn College of Public Affairs, handling microphones and doing so many things behind the scenes as the host institution. As many of you know, Beth Ann will be leaving the Ohio State University at the end of the month and going not too far to the University of Windsor. So it all kind of fits together as part of our cross-border. So you stole one of our investments. But you also had the opportunity to meet a number of Buckeyes as well, as this has integrated throughout the university. I likewise want to thank, I can't name all 60 platform council members, but I think it's actually 67. We took a quick count yesterday of the organizations that are involved. But thanks all of you. This is, for you, by you. I'll get sued here, stealing somebody's trademark on that. But it is FUBU. It's for us, by us, and we thank all of you for the collaboration and coordination that we've had. Now, of course, time and talent are wonderful, but you also need treasure, and I do want to thank our sponsors in this endeavor, PNC Bank, Columbus 2020 and Jobs Ohio, Campbell Soup Company, the Canadian Society of Customs Brokers, Faro Group, Michigan State University College of Law, Center of Canadian Studies, and the Canadian Trucking Alliance for all of their financial support for this event. I likewise, as I mentioned earlier, thank you. And it sounds somewhat self-serving, but I do want to thank my partners at Dickinson Wright for their financial support. We are a law firm. Most people think that's a company. It's actually a partnership. So when we're contributing money out, that means it's not going into individuals' pockets. So that just demonstrates the commitment that my partners have to the Canada-U.S. relationship. And I likewise, we could not have done this, and frankly, there would not be a Canada-U.S. relationship here in Ohio without the long-standing service of the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit. Mary Lynn Becker, who has been here for quite some time, and Dennis Moore have been fighting the good fight here in Ohio and raising a number of us in the Canada-U.S. relationship. Their relationships are long-standing and legion, and we thank them. And of course, the steward of that ship. And the steward of that ship, of course, is our next speaker, the Consul General of Canada in Detroit, Douglas George. Doug has more than 30 years of experience in the Canadian Foreign Service. Prior to his posting here, he's the Consul General for Ohio, that state up north, Kentucky and Indiana. We do sometimes press him as to which one is his favorite, and it just depends on where he's standing is his answer. But we all know which one's first. It's round on the ends and high in the middle, Ohio. But with that, as I said, prior to his service here, he was the ambassador of Canada to Kuwait. He has serviced one of the recognized experts in trade policy within the government of Canada. That long-forgotten issue of softwood lumber that he used to work on, that thing, that just went away. And then the WTO in Geneva, or in Brussels, and in Kingston, Jamaica, and elsewhere. He earned his degree in zoology. He's an accomplished pilot, and as you'll see, just really an amazing human being. Without further ado, it's my privilege to introduce Consul General Doug George.
Thank you, Dan, for that overwhelming introduction. I would certainly like to meet this guy someday. Dan has gone through a long list of thank yous. I'll just reiterate thank you to the sponsors, the founders, the organizers, the speakers, the panelists, and I think especially to Dan for all the hard work he did getting us together. Mesdames et messieurs, mes amis américains, mes amis canadiens, je suis très heureux d'être ici. But I'll do the rest of the speech in English if you don't mind. I'm going to start, much like Ambassador Heyman did, just recalling the tragic events of last week in Orlando. This is an area where we've experienced deep shock and sadness to hear that so many were killed. And our Prime Minister spoke out, extended his condolences and prayers, and said that we would be standing beside and with the LGBT community. And he also, as Canadians do in these events, offered any assistance and help that we could to this community and to the United States. I'd also, it's not the best week for, hasn't been the best week. I would like to recognize the loss of a really great friend of Canada, and that is Mayor, Governor, and Senator George Voinovich from Ohio. He was a visionary leader. We remember his passion for the region. He received the Henry T. King Award from the CUSLI, the Canada-U.S. Law Institute, in recognition of his contribution on Canada-U.S. leadership. And so on behalf of Canada, I would like to express condolences to his family. Now, much like Senator Voinovich, who was raised on the shores of Lake Erie and developed a love for the Great Lakes, my early years were spent on the shores of the St. Clair River. And I grew up less than a mile from the U.S., and I looked out my window and I would see clearly that state up north. And that's how Dan has told me I must refer to that state when I'm in this. But for me, it was, I knew from my earliest years the importance of Canada-U.S. trade. We had the St. Clair River with its freighters and ocean-going vessels. It had bridges, rail tunnel, ferries, pipelines, power lines. And I knew basically in my bones that this was a key part of the importance of two-way trade. So those of us who grew up on the border can directly appreciate its importance. It's the others who haven't had the opportunity to grow up on the border who we need to keep reminding of how important it is, this Canada-U.S. relationship. And when we talk about it up here in Ohio, we understand how important it is, but it's such a big relationship. It affects the whole of the United States. It is something where every state in the Union is affected by and influenced by and benefits from the relationship with Canada. And over the last couple of days, you've heard the importance of this relationship in terms of trade, investment, security, environment, culture, sports, movement of people, and other connections too numerous to list. And Dan told me I wasn't allowed to list them all or we'd never get out of here tonight. And you all out there know how important this relationship is. But it's worth reminding ourselves, and especially worth reminding others, how closely our two economies are intertwined, how long our history of cooperation has been, how it's to our mutual benefit, and how we can be more effective when we're working together. Now, we can't ignore the fact that last year was an election year in Canada, and I think you may have noticed it's election year here in the United States. And it's been said, the thing is, it's been said at this conference that our relationship transcends day-to-day politics and changes in administrations. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to keep sending the message. And I can tell you, with beyond the shadow of a doubt, that Canada's new government gets it. As Prime Minister Trudeau said in Washington earlier this year when he met with President Obama, the nature of the Canada-US relationship is guided by common core values of cooperation and respect. Cooperation because it keeps us safe and prosperous, and respect because it's the surest path of both safeguarding the world we share and honoring the diverse people with whom we share it. The Prime Minister, and he told us this when he met with his heads of mission last week, has made the Canada-US relationship his top priority for his foreign affairs team. And these values of cooperation and respect will permeate every discussion, every agreement, and every debate with which we engage. And we all know that the Canada-US relationship is the envy of other countries. Ambassador Heyman did a much better job than I can do tonight, and the other speakers we've heard, including the Undersecretary, of outlining the breadth and depth of our relationship. So I'm going to just spend a couple minutes, if Dan will allow me, to talk about just a couple of the links that are important to bring us together. First is the trading partnership. Now, we can't ignore it. It is a vital part, we're a vital part of each other's economy. We're each other's largest customer. And I know that many of the speakers have bombarded you, or enlightened you, sorry, with statistics that outline the impressive size of our relationship. So I've agreed that I will limit myself to two. One is the trade we have, the $2 million a day in goods and services, or $1.3 million a minute. I'll let you calculate at the end of the speech how much trade took place. The other is the 9 million jobs in the US that depend on trade and investment with Canada. Now, when I'm out, I meet with state legislators, representatives, governors, etc. And the statistic that I most like to point out to them is how many jobs in their district or state depend on trade with Canada. And this makes it personal for them. These are the people who are going to re-elect them. Now, the one thing about our bilateral relationship, trading relationship, is it works so well that almost nobody notices it. It's a sign of how seamlessly our two economies function together. This is what my Quebec colleague, Eric Marquis, described as the hidden wiring. But we need to keep reminding people that the economies, our two economies are closely interlinked. We have common supply chains, we sell each other parts and components, these get incorporated into other parts and components or finished products, and we sell them out. In other words, we're building things together, and together we're competing more efficiently with the rest of the world. We're better together than apart. Now, all of this movement of parts across the border requires an efficient and secure border. And we've made, and are continuing to make, great progress towards improving the borders through policies such as Beyond the Border, RCC, joint security operations such as Shiprider, pre-clearance, which as we heard just a half hour ago is making big progress, and infrastructure. And Canada is committed to doing its part to continue to strengthen and improve the border to facilitate economic ties. And you can probably guess what's coming. We have put our money where our mouth is. We are making investment in vital infrastructure, and as you have heard, Canada is going to build a new bridge at the world's most important border crossing, which is between Windsor and Detroit, Michigan. Now, I'm contractually obliged to talk about the bridge, but it also is something that gives me great pleasure. When it's finished, it's going to offer a much-needed modern crossing, and it's going to allow trade and travel, tourism to continue to grow. As I said at the beginning, we've had last week there were a few setbacks in the world. One of them was the loss of Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe, who passed away last week at the age of 88. I can tell you that over 15,000 people showed up on Tuesday to pay respect to this hockey legend. And his son Murray, in the eulogy yesterday, said his father was very proud to have his name on a bridge spanning from his adopted home in Detroit to the homeland of his birth. So I'm very pleased to say that Gordie Howe International Bridge is moving forward, and we've gone through various processes. We're very close to issuing the RFP to choose our private sector partner, and we continue to aim for 2020 for completion. But the bridge and the many other initiatives, the many other projects that we're doing are here to make our border more efficient and secure. Now, in addition to trade and border issues, which I wanted to cover in detail, our relationship includes areas that provide other examples to the world on how a truly great relationship works. The joint stewardship of the Great Lakes has been going on for well over 100 years and is an example to the rest of the world on how to do this right. Sharing a joint watershed often ends up as an issue of discord in Canada and between Canada and the U.S. It's an opportunity to work together. You've heard about us being the largest supplier of energy of all kinds. We're also committed to climate change, and we're willing to work with you. We have 80% of our electricity is non-emitting. We're certainly willing to work with you there. On defense and security, the ambassador talked about NORAD, who talked about border security, and anything that endangers one of our countries endangers both. We have a long history of working together multilaterally, bringing our shared values of freedom and democracy to the rest of the world. And on sports, yes, it's been since 1993 since a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup, and someone had the temerity to point that out. But I will note that the Canadian teams in baseball and basketball are improving every single year. So enjoy LeBron while you can. You'll probably be watching the Toronto Raptors next year. We are the North. Now, just before I wrap up, let me talk a little bit about going forward. When Prime Minister Trudeau met with the President in Washington, he described the nature of our relationship as being closer than friends, or actually more like siblings, that took a different path as we matured. Canadians being more the homebodies, and Americans having a bit more of a rebellious nature. Brackets, this doesn't include hockey games. But whatever kind of adults we've grown into, we both share a belief in the responsibility to extend democracy and freedom across the world. And like so many aspects of our relationship, we may take different approaches to get there, but our goals are the same. So the Prime Minister is recommitted to a strong emphasis on working with international organizations such as the UN, as well as being a mediator and a bridge builder in diplomatic terms this time. And he reiterated, and he said to us last week, that diversity is a source of our country's strength. We are thriving and prosperous because of our differences. So before concluding, I just want to reiterate the kind invitation that Dan extended to attend tomorrow morning. I think you will find this talk very interesting. But I would like to wrap up on the last 2 days. We've heard about the complexity, strength, and opportunities of the U.S.-Canada relationship. It's your dedication, your expertise, your groups, your organizations, yourself. I'm confident that with this, we will continue to flourish in the years to come. And Canada and the U.S. will continue to prosper together and remain allies, partners, and best of friends. Thank you all for your kind attention. Merci beaucoup.